Stay one more winter, Cora Lindquist said it the way she said it every spring, standing in the doorway of her small cabin with the snow melting off the eaves behind her, watching the Lakota hunter load his horse to go. She said it lightly, as if it did not matter, as if her whole heart were not in the 3 small words. And every spring, the hunter, whose name was Mato Ska, paused at his work and looked at her for a long moment, and then said, gently, that he could not, that his people needed him on the spring hunts, that he would come again when the cold returned. It had been this way for 4 years. Each autumn, when the first hard cold came down off the mountains, Mato Ska appeared at the edge of Cora's land, and he stayed near through the winter, and he helped her survive it. Each spring, when the snow melted and the passes opened, he loaded his horse and rode north to his people, and Cora watched him go and did not let him see how it hollowed her out. And in between, through the long white months, the 2 of them lived a kind of life that neither of them ever named. 2 lonely people, keeping each other alive and warm and company, careful never to speak the thing that was growing between them, because speaking it would have made the spring partings unbearable. This spring, the 5th one, Cora said the words again. Stay one more winter. And this time something was different in the way Mato Ska looked at her before he answered, something that made Cora's breath catch, because for the first time in 5 years, it seemed as though the hunter was actually considering it. He opened his mouth to give his answer. And the answer he gave, that 5th spring, was the beginning of the end of all their careful silence, and it changed both their lives. But to understand the weight of that answer, you have to go back to the first winter, to the night a dying widow opened her door to a stranger in the snow. 5 years before, Cora Lindquist had been a widow of 1 year, and very close to becoming a dead one. She had come to the territory with her husband, Pers, a quiet Swede with strong hands and a dream of land. They had built the cabin together and broken the ground together, and then Pers had cut his leg with an axe in the 2nd autumn, and the wound had gone bad, and Cora had buried him before the first snow. She had stayed, because there was nowhere to go and no money to go there with, and she had tried to work the place alone, and she had failed, the way one person mostly fails at a thing built for 2. That first winter alone nearly killed her. She had not put up enough food. She did not know how to hunt. The cold came early and hard, and by the deep of it, Cora was burning her furniture for warmth and rationing a few handfuls of beans, and she had begun, in the long dark hours, to make a kind of peace with the idea that she would not see the spring. She was not yet 30. She had simply run out of strength and luck at the same time, the way people did out there, quietly, with no one to see. It was into that frozen, failing cabin that Mato Ska came. He was hunting elk in the high country, driven low by the same hard cold, and he saw the thin smoke of Cora's chimney and the state of the place. And he did a thing he did not have to do. He stopped. He found a half-starved widow burning her chairs, and instead of riding on, the Lakota hunter went out into the storm and came back with meat, and he showed Cora how to make it last, and he cut and stacked wood enough to carry her weeks, and he did not leave until he was sure she would live. He stayed near, that first winter, checking on her, bringing what she needed, asking nothing. Cora was too proud at first, and then too desperate to refuse. By the time the snow melted, the Lakota hunter had kept her alive through a winter that should have buried her, and when he loaded his horse to go north in the spring, Cora stood in the doorway and felt something she had no right to feel for a stranger, which was the fear of being alone again. Mato Ska came back the next autumn, when the first cold came down. He had not promised to. Cora had not asked him to, exactly. But the cold came, and there he was at the edge of her land, and something in Cora's chest unclenched at the sight of him that she did not examine too closely. And so the pattern set itself. the way patterns do, without anyone deciding. Each autumn, Mato Ska came south, ahead of the snow, and stayed near Cora's land through the winter. Each spring he rode north to his people, for the hunts and the gatherings, and the work of his band. He had a place there, Cora understood, duties and kin, and a whole life that had nothing to do with a Swedish widow's cabin. He never spoke much of it, and she never asked much, because asking would have meant admitting how much she wanted him not to have a life that took him away. Through the winters they built something. Cora learned to hunt, finally, because Mato Ska taught her, and to set snares, and read the weather, and put up food enough to last. She grew strong and capable where she had once been failing. But more than the skills, there was the company. The long white evenings by the fire. The talk that started as practical and became, over the years, something deeper. Cora told Mato Ska about Pers and Sweden, and the dream of land that had cost her husband his life. Mato Ska told Cora, slowly, about his own losses. A wife taken by sickness years before. A life that had narrowed to duty after she was gone. They were careful. That was the thing. Two lonely people, snowbound together winter after winter, and they kept a careful distance, never quite touching, never quite saying, because Mato Ska always left in the spring, and a thing spoken aloud could not be unsaid, and the spring partings were hard enough already, without making them unbearable. So they loved each other in the spaces between words, in the mended roofs and the shared meals, and the company that kept two solitudes from swallowing two people whole, and they never named it, and every spring Cora said, "Stay one more winter," lightly, as if it were a joke, and every spring Mato Ska gently said he could not. For Cora, the winters were the only time she was truly alive, and the rest of the year was waiting. She would not have admitted that to anyone, least of all to Mato Ska, but it was the truth, and the truth sat in her chest, all through the long empty summers when the hunter was gone north. In summer, Cora worked her land alone, and the work was good and she was capable now, but the cabin was silent in a way that ached, and she found herself counting the weeks until the cold would come and bring him back. She had built her whole inner year around a man who left every spring, and she knew it was foolish, and she could not stop. The nearest town thought she was strange, the widow Lindquist who kept to herself and never remarried, though more than one widower had come courting. Cora turned them all away, the respectable men with their farms and their motherless children, and she could not have explained to any of them why. The truth was that none of them was Mato Ska. None of them had found her dying in the snow and chosen to stop. None of them sat across a winter fire and listened the way the Lakota hunter listened. Cora had given her heart, years ago, to a man who rode away every spring, and there was no room in it for a respectable widower with a farm. She knew the danger of it. She knew that she was building her life on a season, that one autumn the cold might come and Mato Ska might not, that his people might move north for good, that he might take a wife among his own, that any of 100 things might end the pattern and leave Cora with a silent cabin and a heart with nowhere to go. She knew all of it, and every spring she watched him load his horse and said, "Stay one more winter," and let him go, because the alternative, speaking the truth and perhaps frightening him away entirely, was worse than the ache of the partings. So Cora lived on her seasons, warm and alive from first snow to thaw, hollow and waiting from thaw to first snow. And she told herself it was enough, the way people tell themselves a half a loaf is enough, when they believe the whole loaf is not for them. Mato Ska never told Cora what the winters meant to him, but they meant the same thing, and the not telling cost him as much as it cost her. He had lost his wife, Tassina, to the coughing sickness 6 years before this story, and her death had emptied him in a way his people could see but could not reach. He had thrown himself into duty, into the hunt and the care of his band, because duty was a way to be useful without being alive, and Mato Ska had not expected or wanted to be alive again. Then he had found a half-starved widow burning her chairs in a failing cabin, and he had stopped to help her, and somewhere across that first winter, the emptiness in him had begun, against his will, to fill. But Mato Ska carried a weight Cora did not fully understand, and it was the weight of his people. He was not free the way a man with no one is free. His band needed him. The spring hunts fed them. The gatherings bound them together. In those years, the Lakota were being pressed from every side, their lands taken, their people herded toward the reservations, and a man of Mato Ska's skill and standing could not simply abandon them to go live in a Swedish widow's cabin. To stay with Cora would mean leaving his people in a time when they could least afford to lose a strong man. He felt the pull of Cora every spring, and every spring his duty pulled harder, and so he rode north with his heart turned south, and he told himself, as Cora told herself, that the winters were enough. He was wrong, and he knew he was wrong, and the knowing grew heavier each year, because a man cannot keep half a heart in 2 places forever. Each spring the leaving got harder. Each autumn the returning felt more like coming home, and less like a duty of mercy to a woman in need. Mato Ska was a careful man, and an honorable one, and he had been telling himself for years that the careful distance protected them both. But somewhere in the 4th winter, he had stopped believing it, and he had begun to understand that the day was coming when he would have to choose, and that no choice would be without a great cost. The 5th spring, when Cora said, "Stay 1 more winter," in the doorway, Mato Ska had already spent the whole winter, knowing the choice had finally come due. The 4th winter had been the one that broke the careful silence open, even though neither of them spoke it, and it is worth telling, because it is what made the 5th spring's answer possible. It was the hardest winter in years. A sickness came through the territory, and Cora caught it. The fever and the rattling chest that killed so many. And for a week, she lay in her cabin, too weak to tend the fire or feed herself, and she would have died, alone, the way she had nearly died that first winter. But Mato Ska was near, as he always was in the cold months, and he found her burning with fever, and he did not leave her side for 6 days. He cooled the fever, and dripped broth past her lips, and kept the fire high, and sat through the long nights when her breathing went thin and frightening. He did for Cora exactly what no one had done for his wife Tessina, who had died while he was away on a hunt, and Cora did not know, in her fever, how much it cost him to do it, or how much it healed in him. The fever broke on the 6th night. Cora opened her eyes to find Mato Ska beside her, hollow-eyed and gray with exhaustion, and she understood that he had not slept in days, that he had pulled her back from the edge with his own 2 hands. She was too weak to speak. She only reached out and took his hand, and Mato Ska held it, and for a long moment, the careful distance of 4 years simply was not there. They had crossed something, in that fevered week, even without words. They both knew it. But when Cora was well, the distance came back, because the spring was coming, and the distance was how they survived the spring. Neither of them spoke of the week of the fever. Mato Ska loaded his horse when the snow melted, and Cora stood in the doorway and said, "Stay 1 more winter." And he said he could not, and he rode north. But it was different now, and they both felt it. The thing between them had grown too large for the spaces between words. It was only a matter of time before one of them had to say it, or it would say itself. The 5th autumn, Mato Ska came back changed, though Cora could not at first say how. He was quieter than usual, and there was a weight on him that even the winter's ease did not lift. Cora watched him through the early cold and worried, because she had learned to read this careful man over 5 years, and something was pressing on him that he had not yet said. She did not push. She had learned that Mato Ska said things in his own time, like Wanbli, like all the men in these stories worth loving, and that pushing only made him withdraw. At last, deep into the winter, on a night when the wind was howling and the fire was low, Mato Ska told her, "My band is being moved north," he said, "to the reservation lands. The order has come. We have until the deep cold breaks to go, or the soldiers will make us go. After this winter, Cora, I do not know if I can come south again. The reservation is far, and the way will be watched, and a Lakota man riding alone toward a settler's cabin will not be safe. This winter may be the last." He looked into the low fire. "I have known it since autumn. I did not know how to tell you. I am telling you now, because you should not be surprised in the spring. This spring, when I go, it may be for good." Cora felt the floor of her life drop away. The pattern she had built her whole heart around, the seasons of warmth and waiting, was ending. The thing she had always feared, the autumn he did not come, was arriving, only worse, because it was not chance taking him, but the whole hard machinery of the government and the soldiers, and the taking of the Lakota lands. There would be no more winters. The 5th was the last. She did not weep in front of him. She had her pride, even then. But that night, after Mato Ska had gone to his shelter, Cora lay awake and understood that the careful silence of 5 years had run out of time. If this was the last winter, then stay one more winter would no longer be enough, because there would be no more winters to stay for. She would have to say the real thing, the thing beneath the joke, or lose him to the north forever with it unsaid. Knowing it was the last, the 5th winter was both the sweetest and the most painful of all the years. They stopped, by some unspoken agreement, keeping quite so careful a distance. They sat closer by the fire. They talked longer into the nights. Mato Ska taught Cora the last of what he knew about surviving alone, urgently now, like a man trying to leave a person everything he can before he goes. And Cora drank in every day of it, storing the winter up against the empty years she could see coming, when the cold would arrive and bring no hunter with it. But neither of them, even now, quite said the words. The habit of 5 years was strong, and there was a new fear layered over the old one. Cora was afraid that if she spoke her heart, and Mato Ska still rode north, as duty demanded, then the leaving would be 100 times more terrible for having named what was lost. And Mato Ska was caught in the oldest bind of his life, between a woman he had come to love past all his careful defenses, and a people who needed him in their hardest hour and could not spare him. He did not see how he could choose Cora without abandoning his band. He did not see how he could choose his band without abandoning his heart. So he said nothing, and the winter ran out, day by precious day, toward the spring that would end everything. The snow began to melt, the eaves began to drip, and Cora Lindquist understood that she had only days left, and then hours, and that she had to decide whether to let Mato Ska ride north with the truth unsaid, the way they always had, or to break 5 years of silence and speak it, and risk the unbearable. She made her choice the morning he began to load his horse. She came and stood in the doorway, with the snow melting off the eaves behind her, the way she had stood 5 springs running. And she said the old words, "Stay one more winter," lightly, out of habit, before she could stop them. But then, for the first time, she did not let it rest there. She kept going. "No," Cora said. Not that. I have said that for 5 years, and it is a lie, or half a lie, and you are leaving for good, and I will not let you go on half-truths. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. I do not want you to stay one more winter, Mato Ska. I want you to stay all of them. Every winter, and every spring, and every summer, until we are both old. I have loved you since the first winter, when you found me dying and chose to stop. I have built my whole life around your seasons and pretended it was enough, because I was afraid that saying so would frighten you off. Well, you are leaving anyway, for good, so I have nothing left to lose by saying it. I love you. I do not want a hunter who comes with the cold and goes with the thaw. I want a husband. I want a life. I want you. Mato Ska went very still, his hands frozen on the pack he was tying. I know about your people, Cora pressed on, the words pouring out now after 5 years dammed up. I know they need you, and I know they are being driven north, and I know you cannot abandon them. I am not asking you to. I am telling you my heart, so it is not a secret I carry alone for the rest of my life. If you must go north with your band, then go, and I will not blame you, and I will carry this winter in my chest until I die. But you will go knowing the truth. You will not ride off thinking I only wanted help surviving the cold. I wanted you. I have always wanted you. There. It is said. I have wanted to say it for 5 years. She stood in the doorway, with her heart finally emptied out into the cold spring air, and she watched Mato Ska, and she waited for his answer, the answer she had dreaded and longed for through 5 years of careful silence. And the answer he gave changed both their lives. Mato Ska set down the pack. He turned from the horse, and he came to the doorway, and he stood in front of Cora, and what she saw in his face was not the careful distance of 5 years. It was something unguarded, something he had not let her see before. I have been trying to find the words to say the same thing all winter, Mato Ska said, and I could not, because I did not know how to say I love you and I must leave you in the same breath. They did not fit together, so I said nothing, like a coward, and told myself the silence protected you. He shook his head. Here is my answer, Cora, the true one. When I told you my people are being moved north, I told you the truth, but I did not tell you all of it. I am not the only strong man in my band. There are others who can hunt, others who can lead. I have told myself for years that they could not spare me, because needing to be needed was the only thing that kept me standing after Tessina died. It was not entirely true. I made myself necessary so I would not have to feel anything else. Cora hardly dared to breathe. I have spoken with my band, Mato Ska went on, through this whole last winter, in my heart and at the autumn gathering with the elders, in truth. I told them there was a woman in the south. I asked what a man owes his people and what he owes his own heart. And an old man, older than my grandfather, told me a thing I have carried all winter. He said, a man who stays only out of duty, with his heart turned elsewhere, gives his people his hands, but not his spirit, and they feel the lack. He said, go where your spirit is, and be whole, and visit us whole, and that is worth more to us than a hollow man who stayed. Mato Ska took Cora's hands. So my answer, Cora, is not one more winter. My answer is all of them. If you will have me, I will not ride north this spring. I will stay. I will be your husband. I will keep ties to my people and bring you to them and bring them to us, and I will be whole, the way the old man said, instead of half a heart in 2 places. That is my answer. I should have given it years ago. Cora Lindquist wept then, finally, all the tears she had held back through 5 springs of watching him go. Only this spring he was not going. This spring, for the first time, the snow melted and the passes opened, and the Lakota hunter did not load his horse and ride north. He stayed. They were married before the summer, in the simple way of that country, with a few witnesses from Mato Ska's band, who rode south for it, and a Swedish hymn Cora sang over the joining, because it was the one thing she had left of Pers and her old country, and Mato Ska understood that honoring her dead was part of loving her living. The town talked, of course. The widow Lindquist and her Lakota hunter married at last. The strange pair finally explained. Cora did not care what the town said. She had spent 5 years with half a heart, and now she had the whole of it, and a town's opinion weighed nothing against that. The life they built was not simple. Mato Ska had not abandoned his people, and that meant the hard history of those years reached even their cabin. There were long trips north to the reservation lands to keep the ties alive, and there were dangers in a Lakota man and a white woman living openly together, and there were seasons of worry and want. But they built it whole, the two of them, the way the old man had counseled, instead of half. Mato Ska's band came to know Cora, and Cora came to know them, and the cabin that had nearly been a widow's grave became a place where two worlds met and rested, and the seasons, which had once divided Cora's life into warmth and waiting, became simply the seasons of a shared life. The first snow no longer meant a hunter arriving and a clock starting to run down toward his leaving. It meant only winter, with her husband beside her, and then spring, with her husband still beside her, and then summer, the season Cora had once spent hollow and waiting, now as full as all the rest. Cora and Mato Ska grew old together on that land, and Cora never again had to say, "Stay one more winter," because he never again left. She would think, sometimes, of the 5 springs she had stood in that doorway and said the words lightly, as a joke, because she was too afraid to say the truth beneath them. She had wasted 5 years, in a way, on a careful silence that protected nothing and cost them both more than honesty ever would have. If she had spoken her heart the first spring, or the second, how many more whole years might they have had? She did not let herself dwell on it. They had what they had, and what they had was good, and the long years together at the end outweighed the careful, wasted ones at the start. But she drew a lesson from it, and she passed it on. When their daughter grew up and fell in love with a young man and was too proud and frightened to say so, it was Cora who took the girl aside. "Do not do what I did," Cora told her daughter. "I loved a man for 5 years, and I said only stay one more winter, because the whole truth frightened me. 5 years, child, of half words, because I was afraid that if I said all of it and he still left, the leaving would be unbearable. Do you know what I learned? The thing I was protecting myself from happened anyway, almost. He nearly rode north for good with my heart unspoken. I only just caught it in time. If you love someone, say it. Say all of it. The careful silence does not protect you from losing them. It only robs you of the years you could have had if you had been brave." And so the story passed down, the way these stories do, from a Swedish grandmother who had nearly died alone in the snow, and instead lived out her long life beside the Lakota hunter who had stopped to save her. She had begged him, 5 springs running, to stay one more winter. In the end, he gave her all of them. And the answer that changed both their lives, when it finally came, had been waiting all along, on the far side of 5 years of fear, for one of them to be brave enough to speak first.